You're all familiar with this, typical vCenter. Let's approach this from the point of view of an application owner, someone who's going to run applications in this environment, for that's what virtual machines actually are. Heard from Kieran, some performance isolation that's built into the box that automatically isolates different workloads. If you're looking at virtualization, you're not running one database. You're not running one instance of a VDI desktop. Hopefully you're running hundreds, if not thousands, of these virtual machines, and they represent applications. Performance isolation means that if you're going to run a database in this environment and you're a DBA and you're concerned about the performance you're getting from your virtual machine, the Tintri VM store is effectively isolating the performance workloads from each other. You saw with Justin that our technology makes it easy for database DBAs and for storage admins to get along. And when a DBA goes and looks at his database and he looks at storage performance metrics and says, hey, I've got some storage, it appears some storage latency, some problems. In a typical storage environment, you would go to the storage admin and the storage admin would say, looks fine to me. Everything looks great. And as Justin showed you, with Tintri VM Store, you can go into the individual VM and you can actually look at the latency that is actually happening and diagnose whether there's a host problem, whether there's a network problem, and effectively drill down and quickly resolve the issue. What Tintri also provides is, because we're per VM, because we're managing things on a VM level, that we're doing things like snapshots on a VM level. We're doing replication on a VM level. We're doing things like synchronization on a VM level. And there's a very clever tool that our engineers have created called SyncVM, and that's what I want to show you. I want to show you how SyncVM works. So I've got a bunch of SQL Server databases. I happen to have them running. I happen to have data in them. If I open up my database here, DB number 10, let's open a console. I'm going to log into it and just bring up a SQL Server management tool that you may or may not be familiar with, but it's a pretty standard tool. There we are. And I apologize for the kind of cramped screen. I have to work with it, but it's my jump box. If we go into this system, think of this as the primary database, the database that I've created, and perhaps this is actually the production database that's sitting out there. And if I go in and open a query here on this production database, and let's have a look at a very simple table. And I made it very simple for the purposes of this demonstration. And I just say execute, and we're going to see that this particular database in this table has 150,556 rows. So in using the tools that Tintri provides, let's find my browser. Here we go. Here we're back on the Tintri VM store. Here's the 6 or so databases that I've created. Here is the DB10 that we're looking at right now. And if you go in, you'll see this menu where we can create snapshots. We can actually view the snapshots that we've already created. I'll click on that in just a moment. You can also clone the VMs from here and synchronize. And we'll have a look at synchronize in just a minute, because you can synchronize both the individual VM itself. You can go in and pull out individual files from some vDisks that exist on these VMs, or you can actually refresh the individual vDisks separately. So I know from this menu it might not sink in what we're able to do. We're not only able to see at the virtual machine level, but we're able to see at the individual vDisk level, and we're able to attach vDisks to VMs so that you can go in and pull out individual files from those vDisks. If you're running a VDI environment and you'd like to do some kind of self-service restores for your VDI customers, you can use this menu, the Restore VMs and Files, to actually say, you know what? I would like to be able to restore an individual guest OS file from a snapshot that's been attached to this machine, and let's do it at the 8,000 rows. I gave it these names. Snapshots can have any name you want. They can be automated. Justin showed us how to automate it there. In this case, I'm going to attach all of the vDisks that exist on this machine from this snapshot from the past. So this was taken at 1:21 this afternoon. I happened to call it DB10, and I was just keeping track of the number of rows I had in these databases. And then I say restore. What's going on? So let me see if I can, where's the top of the screen? Go down here, and I believe I have a little, there we go. I have 2 slides to be able to show you. So this is, I can make this bigger, and I Should I press on that button? Is that going to? No. Oh, there. That was kind of boo. Oh, it worked. Okay. SyncVM is a powerful tool that not just restores an entire VM back to a point in time. So snapshots are going on in the background. If I need to restore a database or a particular virtual machine back to a point in time, I can do the entire VM. If, however, I would like to go in and restore individual vDisks, I have that ability, and I have the ability to take a vDisk, a virtual disk from an individual snapshot and attach it to the virtual machine as a new drive letter and be able to pull individual files out of there. That's a self-service restore model. It also means, as a storage person, when I come in and talk to a database person, they've already got their own DBA tools. They've already got their tools for doing backups and restore, and they probably are very comfortable with those. What I want to do is complement them with a new tool, and that's what this file level restore gives them. I don't have to touch any of these individual drives here. I don't have to do the sledgehammer effect where I'm going to restore every single database on that drive letter, because often SQL Server, Oracle, you're going to run multiple databases on individual mount points or drive letters. Here, I can mount this as a new drive letter for you, and you can pull files out of there. So let's have a look. And you are back here. Oh, I don't want to reconnect. Well, I guess I will. Let's go back into my virtual machine. Let's find you. You are right here. There you go. So now when I go down in this virtual machine, go down the page, you'll see these disk drives here right now. I've created these disk drives E and F for the data files and the log files. Once I skip down here into the disk management menu, all I need to do is online those disk drives, and you'll see that they show up in the menu. Let's online you. And you're seeing it populate in the background. Not offline. No. Let's not offline that. And then online you. There you go. There's the G drive. I happen to have a single database in there. It happens to be called TPCC. Okay, that's pretty nice. So as a storage admin now, I can enable people to do their own restores. I'm not clobbering over things. I'm giving them a flexible option, and I'm doing things with the vDisks. That's interesting. Let's take it a little bit further. So I'm talking about an individual virtual machine and the ability to set it back or do time travel with that machine either at the VM level or down at the vDisk level. But let's talk about other virtual machines that are in the same environment. What if we could take what we've just done with a vDisk and attach it to a different virtual machine out there? Do we have that flexibility? What would that mean? Well, in a test and dev environment, often you set up environments and you're going to set up say 100 machines, 50 machines, even 10 machines, and each one of them are going to have their own personality, and that personality is tied to the OS disk. And what I mean by personality is an IP address, a name of the machine, maybe some content information, some applications that you need that you don't really want to restore. You don't want to reclone them. You don't want to have to set them up all over again because it's not very efficient to do that. Why don't we leave the personality of the machine alone and go back and instead restore or be able to propagate or synchronize all of these vDisks to other virtual machines that are out there. And that's the clever thing that we can do that helps a test and dev environment work very nicely. Remember this, in this environment I have DB10 that I had a couple of snapshots on, so I'll show you here the snapshots. DB10 has, there we go, 150,556 rows, another one with different rows. Before I go in and do this, let me grab number 11. Let's open the console. Let me show you how many rows exist in number 11. Let's scoot down here, bring up SQL Server. Do that same query again against the TPCC database. There we go. Okay. Now, let's execute this whole thing. And you notice there's 0 rows. There are 0 records in DB11 right now. So I have no data. Nothing's in this database. Now in DB11, instead of refreshing or restoring the VM or individual files, let's refresh the actual vDisks themselves. Let's choose a virtual machine to refresh from. So DB10, that's where I had that 150,000 rows. Choose a snapshot from this area. We can choose the 101,045 or 150. Let's choose the 150. And here's where you get the granularity, the ability to restore all the drives, one drive, multiple drives. I'm going to restore 1 and 2 and press OK. So how does this show up for you? Bring this back up here. So this is the second graph that I wanted to show you, and if I'm going to push this here, this means that you can set up production environments based on an individual machine. This could be a production database, data warehouse. It can be an OLTP database running in your environment, and then someone could approach you and say, I want to make 10 copies of this database, or I want 50 copies of this database. You would go into the analytics that were demonstrated, and first you would say, do I have the resources and the horsepower to be able to run development instances like this in my environment? Yes, you do. You would then go and clone this environment, create this environment, and then refresh it using this technology behind the scenes. And let's go in and see how many records we have down there. There we are. We actually have 2 sessions going on. So now that's refreshed. Let's go into here, and that's DB11. And it had to reboot the machine as part of reconnecting those drives. So ignore the server manager for now. Bring up the database. And when we're done, we're going to have 150,000 rows in there.
When you did that copy, did the VM get shut down?
Yeah.
Before that was done?
Yes, as part of the process, it shuts down the VM, reboots it, and then
Yeah, but did it shut the VM down before it actually put the data back in place? Mm-hmm. It did, okay.
Yeah.
So the way we're seeing this actually used in customers is we have SyncVM has three distinct capabilities, right?
Yep.
Single file restore. There's basically the in place. I just want to roll the VM in place back to a previous point in time or forward to another point in time in the chain, not create a clone. Or the one that Christopher just showed here, which is I basically want to take a set of data from one VM and inject it instantaneously into another one. And the way that I've seen my customers mostly use this is in the test dev database scenario where they've got production data. DBAs used to do nightly data dumps. Tons of data over the wire. They would have to make sure it finished in time. They'd have to babysit it. They were moving data over the LAN. We've been able to completely eradicate that, sometimes with a single line of code from our REST API or PowerShell that basically on demand now, the DBA, without even going into any of our interfaces, can say, I want to take that production database, I want to SyncVM it with my QA. It is totally transparent to production, has no effect on it, doesn't know what's going on. The only thing that needs to happen is that test dev VM reboots, and it's got the new set of data in it. So we've been able to take scenarios that took hours and reduce them down to literally a 90-second VM reboot.
And they're also sharing storage, right? So when you have 10 copies of it, there's only one version that's actually behind it, and it's shared with the golden version as well. So we're able to do this stuff again because the data management is at a VM level, and the VM is a first-class object for actually doing data management.
So how much of it is dependent on VSS? Because all of the examples you've used have been Windows-based. Can you do this on non-Windows operating systems in a secure manner?
Yeah, I mean, the whole data movement is predicated on we're attaching and retaching and moving vDisks. We're not actually going in and plucking rows and columns out of the database tables.
But ultimately, if you've got a database that's been updated live, and you don't put it in, you don't quiesce it before you take a copy, a physical disk copy, surely you have a risk of corruption of that data.
So I think part of this is the reason that we offer crash consistent and VM consistent snapshots. And when you're looking at something like a VM consistent snapshot, That's where VM Tools comes into play if we're talking VMware and VSS. We do have customers who are Linux heavy, and the great thing is if you've got VM Tools, you can write a little script and put it in the VM Tools folder, and it'll execute that. So it is not something that's, say, part of VM Tools, but they can ultimately quiesce what they're doing. It actually happens, the customer I'm thinking of happens to be located overseas, and they're a big SAP hosting customer, and they do quiescing of giant SAP environments, all on Linux.
There's a bit more work, but it's still
still available, but yeah,
possible.
correct. We actually wish VM Tools did a bit more than it did, right? I mean, I think a lot of customers who are really into this actually wish that sometimes it would even do log truncation or have the option to do log truncation. It's one of those things I've heard requested by, to VMware for years now. VM Tools has kind of just stayed at the level of VSS integration it's been at since day one.
Well, on the Linux side, they're really pushing everybody to the open VM tools on the Linux side. And that has a little bit more functionality.
Right.
About the SyncVM, is the backup is in the same box or in another box, or other boxes
These were all in the same box?
on the same box?
So, yes, the demo is on the same box. However, if we're replicating database, it doesn't have to be a database. If we're replicating a VM to a target machine, you can do the SyncVM from the snapshot. It doesn't have to be 2 live VMs. What you can't do is inject the point in time across another VM store yet. So you could, in theory, do something where a snapshot was being replicated and recover that snapshot to a VM that's running, but the target where you're injecting the data has to be within the system where the source data also resides.
But the common case would be, or a common case would be, if you had production and test, that you'd do a replication to a test array and then do the sync from that environment.
It'd be nice if you could just shift the snapshot off on its own as an isolated object. Just move it in its entirety.
Interesting. So I just had a major brainstorm. So that's a good question that I'm now going to talk to engineering about. We do something called remote cloning. So we can forcibly remote clone a VM to another system. I just was thinking about a remote snapshot, or forcing a remote snapshot into the SyncVM process. So the good news is, because of the VM-centric nature of our file system, these things are totally doable. It's ultimately about getting them through engineers'
And the reason I was asking
brains
that,
and into code, into the product.
The reason I was asking that is, obviously, Kieran, you said it saves storage, which is obviously a good thing. But the customers typically mix and match dev and production on the same box. If they buy more than one, do they tend to have?
It depends. I mean, I think some customers, for their most mission-critical applications, would not. So I think but I think what you see in many cases is the number of copies that you have in development is far larger than what you have in production. So the savings, yes, you end up with 1 copy on the destination, but maybe you have 10 or 20 people that are actually sharing that copy. Yeah.
Are you maintaining an audit log of what's actually being restored for, like, if you're restoring a disk from one, virtual machine to another, so that, you have someone who is, viewing these files on their own personal VDI or something like that?
We do have an audit log where what got attached to which VM is visible. Any modifying operation like that goes in the audit log. Our facilities for reviewing the audit log are not particularly high-tech at the moment. That's been something on our to-do list.